Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to be honest with you, and with everyone listening. Usually when you hand me a stack of research notes or, a new book, I have a pretty immediate categorization process.
Sure.
I look at the cover, I scan the table of contents, and I put it in a box. If it's about, say, interest rates and housing markets, it goes in the economics box.
Right.
I grab my calculator, I prepare for a headache.
That's a pretty standard filing system. I think most of us operate that way. Church and state. Wallet and soul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the stack of papers you've handed me today, it completely breaks my filing system. It's just sitting there on the desk looking innocent enough. But the content is essentially a manifesto that says those two boxes, the economic and the spiritual, are not just connected. It argues that separating them is the fundamental error of human history.
It is a radical proposition. What we are looking at today is a collection of theological and philosophical texts, primarily focused on Quranic exegesis or interpretation. But they aren't discussing, the things you'd expect, not prayer rituals or fasting. They are discussing the sociology of land ownership, the physics of food production, and the very definition of freedom.
And it's not doing it lightly. The central premise here is it's just mind-bending. It's suggesting that the concept of private property, specifically owning land and natural resources, isn't just a political choice or an economic strategy we settled on.
No.
It argues that it is a theological violation.
That's the core argument right there. It posits that claiming ownership of the earth is a form of idolatry.
Which is a heavy word, idolatry.
It is. In the source material, the term is shirk, which is the cardinal sin in Islamic theology. And usually when people hear that, they think of, bowing down to a golden calf or a stone statue.
That's the immediate image, yeah.
But these texts argue that you can commit shirk with a title deed. You can commit idolatry with a no trespassing sign.
Okay, I think we need to put a massive disclaimer right up front here.
Yes, absolutely.
We are unpacking a specific, very intense philosophical worldview presented in these sources. We aren't here to tell you to burn your mortgage papers or, start a revolution.
Not at all.
We aren't taking a political stance. Our mission, as always, is to explore the logic. Because I have to say, even if you disagree with the premise, the internal logic of this divine economy is fascinatingly consistent.
It is. It's a closed system of logic. Once you accept that first domino, the rest fall in a very specific pattern. And to understand it, we have to follow the roadmap the sources lay out.
And that roadmap, it doesn't start with money. It doesn't start with laws.
No. It starts with biology.
Which surprised me. I really expected us to jump right into interest rates or charity or something. But the text starts with a mango seed.
It does. It starts with what it calls the cyclic order, or in the terminology of the text, Dari Nizam.
Okay, let's unpack this, the cyclic order.
So the text asks us to look at the biological reality of the planet. Just how does life actually sustain itself? And the answer is it operates in a loop, a circle.
The circle of life.
Precisely. Take the mango seed, like you said. You plant it in the soil. It interacts with the nutrients in the water. It sprouts. It becomes a sapling. Over years, it becomes a mature tree.
Right.
It flowers. It produces a fruit, the mango.
Yeah.
And inside that mango is...
Heather seed.
And that seed falls to the ground, and the process just repeats. The destination of the mango seed is to become a tree to produce another seed. It returns to its origin.
Okay.
The source also uses the example of the hen and the egg. A chick grows into a hen. It lays an egg, which produces another chick.
It's a closed loop.
Yeah.
A self-perpetuating system.
It is, but the texts point out a really critical feature of this loop that we often overlook. Biological growth has a stop sign. It has a destination called maturity.
Meaning it doesn't grow forever.
Right. I mean, look at the human body. You're born as an infant, you grow rapidly, you become a child, an adolescent, an adult. But somewhere in your early 20s, you stop growing taller.
You reach your physical peak.
You do. And if your body continued to grow at the rate of an infant for your entire life, you'd be 50 feet tall. You'd collapse under your own weight. It would be a complete disaster.
Or it'd be cancer. Unchecked biological growth is usually a disease.
Exactly. So in the cyclic order, in the biological world, the goal is to reach maturity, maintain that form, reproduce to ensure the species continues, and then, decline. That is the contract of the body.
Okay, so the body is a machine that has a specific maintenance schedule and a finite lifespan. I'm with you so far.
But here is the pivot. The texts argue that the human self, your consciousness, your spirit, your personality, does not belong to the cyclic order.
The self isn't a mango.
The self is not a circle. The self, it argues, follows a linear trajectory. It is an open-ended line that is meant to move upward and outward infinitely.
Explain that, because I feel like I change, sure, but I don't know if I feel linear.
Well, think about your capacity for character development. Think about your capacity for knowledge or for love or for patience. Is there a maturity point for those things? Can you ever wake up and say, okay, that's it. I have learned enough. I am now 100% knowledgeable. I don't need to learn another thing.
No. If I said that, I'd be delusional.
Or you'd be spiritually dead. To say, I have arrived in the realm of the self is stagnation. The body must stop growing to survive. The self, on the other hand, must keep growing to survive.
So the self feeds on the infinite.
Infinite discovery, infinite connection, infinite improvement. It has no ceiling.
So we have a finite body housing an infinite self.
A finite vehicle carrying an infinite passenger.
I love that analogy. The body is the car. The self is the driver.
Yes, and this is where the economic argument begins to take shape.
Yeah.
Because if we accept this distinction, that the body is just the vehicle and the self is the purpose of the journey, then what is the role of material resources? What is the role of food, shelter, clothing, money?
Fuel.
Exactly. Economic resources are merely the maintenance budget for the car. You need gas, you need oil changes, you need to fix the tires, you need the car to be functional so the passenger can go on their infinite journey.
But the text argues we've messed this up completely.
We haven't just messed it up, we've inverted it. The argument is that human civilization has largely become a cult of car maintenance. We spend 90, maybe 95% of our waking energy just trying to get fuel for the car.
Or just polishing the car.
Or polishing the car, or upgrading the upholstery.
Or obsessing over the rims while the passenger is asleep in the back seat.
Or worse, the passenger is starving because we spent all our resources on the paint job. The sources argue that we have made the means, which is survival, into the end. We live to survive. We don't survive to live.
That hits hard. Because if you look at the average work week, the average person's life anxiety, it's almost all about car maintenance.
It is.
Paying the rent, buying the groceries, procuring the retirement fund. It's all cyclic order stuff.
And as long as you are trapped in the anxiety of that cyclic order, you cannot fully engage in the infinite journey. You are just too busy surviving to evolve.
So the divine economy that these texts are proposing, it isn't just about being fair or redistributing wealth for its own sake.
No, that's a consequence, not the goal.
The goal is liberation. It's about automating the car maintenance so we can finally actually drive.
Precisely. The goal of a just economic system, according to these sources, is to solve the animal problem, the survival problem, permanently and universally. To take the worry of where is my next meal coming from completely off the table for everyone.
So how do we do that? Because, humans have been trying to solve poverty for a very long time. This brings us to the next big concept in the stack, a word that I had never heard used in this context before. Rububiyya.
Rububiyya. It's a core Quranic term. It comes from the root rab. Now, if you look at a standard translation, rab is usually translated as Lord.
Right, I've seen.
And rububiyya gets translated as lordship. But the authors of these notes argue that Lord is a very poor translation because it implies a ruler, a king, someone sitting on a throne just giving orders.
And that's not what it means.
Not etymologically. The texts define rububiyya as a process. It is the systematic process of nourishing, sustaining, and developing a thing from its inception all the way to its point of perfection.
That sounds more like parenting.
Or gardening.
It is exactly like gardening. A gardener doesn't just rule the roses. The gardener provides the soil, the water, the sunlight, the fertilizer, the pruning. The gardener facilitates the growth. That is rububiyya.
Okay.
And the full Quranic phrase is rububiyya alamin sustenance for the worlds.
Worlds, plural.
Plural, yes. And the key takeaway here is the scope. The text emphasizes that this system of sustenance is completely universal. It is not for a specific nation. It is not for a specific class. It is not even just for believers.
It's for everyone.
For the entire human species, indiscriminately.
So the divine economy is essentially a universal welfare system built into the cosmos.
In a cosmic sense, yes. And the sources provide what they call a scientific argument for this. They ask us to zoom out, way, way out, and look at the physical infrastructure that keeps us all alive. This is where we get to the milkshake analogy. I have to say, reading about the rotation of the Earth described as a blender was a definite highlight for me.
It's a vivid image, isn't it? But the physics behind it are basically sound. The text asks, how do we get the means of life? Let's start with the absolute basics. Soil.
You can't grow food on rock.
No. You need soft, cultivable earth. But the Earth's crust is made of hard, igneous rock, so how do we get the soil?
Grinding, I assume. Weathering.
You need a grinder, a mill. The text points to the rotation of the planet. We were spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. This massive rotation creates friction, it drives the winds, it drives the weather systems, and it creates a constant low-level geological grinding action.
It's a cosmic blender.
The text calls it a milkshake machine. It spins the elements, mixes them, grinds the rocks into dust over millions of years, and that creates the layer of topsoil that we all depend on.
Yeah.
And then the text asks a very rude question. Did you spin the planet?
I can safely say I did not.
Did you build the machine? No. Okay, then it looks up the atmosphere. The text highlights that we're surrounded by a vacuum filled with flying debris, meteors, space dust, deadly radiation.
We're basically in a cosmic shooting gallery.
We are. And yet we have this 10-mile thick protective shield, the atmosphere. It burns up most of the meteors, turning them into dust, which becomes more soil, by the way. It filters the radiation. It keeps the oxygen in. And again, the text asks, did you construct the ceiling?
Still no.
And then the water cycle. This is the big one. We need fresh water. The oceans are full of salt water. We can't drink it.
Right.
So the system uses the sun, a nuclear reactor 93 million miles away, to evaporate the ocean water, leaving the salt behind. It turns heavy, undrinkable water into light, drinkable vapor.
Free desalination.
Free, solar-powered desalination on a planetary scale. The winds then move the clouds over the land. The mountains act as reservoirs. They freeze the water as snow and ice so it doesn't all rush down at once and flood us. They hold it and release it gradually as the heat rises in the summer, feeding the rivers all year long.
It's a planetary scale irrigation and distribution network.
That's it. So the argument is that the factory floor, which is the Earth, the machinery, the rotation and atmosphere, the energy source, the sun and all the raw materials, the water and rock. None of this was an investment made by human beings.
We didn't pay for the factory.
We didn't buy the machines. We didn't hire the workforce.
So if we look at this from a strictly economic perspective, we are getting a free ride, a very comprehensive free ride.
You're operating in a fully subsidized facility. And this leads directly to the central legal argument of the texts. If you walk into a factory that you didn't build, using machines you didn't buy, processing materials you didn't mine, can you pick up the finished product at the end of the assembly line and say, this is mine, I created this, I own this exclusively?
Well, you can say, I worked to pick it up. You can claim your labor.
You can absolutely claim wages for your labor. You can say, I put in the effort to harvest this apple. But can you claim you own the apple tree? Can you claim you own the land the tree stands on, the soil it grew from, the sunlight that fed it?
The text says no. A very emphatic no.
The text argues that since we are not the creators of the fundamental means of production, the natural world, we cannot claim absolute ownership of it. We are not the owners. We are at best the workers or the beneficiaries.
This brings us to the grammar lesson. And I know usually when we say grammar lesson on a deep dive, people might reach for the skip button.
Don't do it.
No, don't do it. Because this distinction is actually the key to the entire legal argument. It's everything.
It really is. It's the difference between two tiny Arabic particles, lith and la.
Lila versus lakum.
Right. So whenever the Quran speaks about who the earth belongs to, the title deed, the ultimate authority, it uses the phrase lila, to God. The particle li denotes absolute possession, the ultimate title.
The deed is in God's name.
Correct. But when the text speaks about the relationship between the earth and human beings, it switches the preposition. It uses lakum. He created it for you, lakum.
Now, in English, 2 and 4 can sound pretty similar. This letter is to you. This gift is for you.
They can, but in legal terms, they are worlds apart. Lakum implies benefit. It implies usufruct.
Usufruct. That's a term from Roman law, isn't it?
It is. It means the right to use and enjoy the profits of property that belongs to someone else.
Okay.
You can live in the house. You can eat the fruit from the garden. You can enjoy all the amenities. But you do not hold the title deed. You cannot sell the house. You cannot burn the house down. You are a tenant.
So we are all just tenants in a very nice, fully furnished apartment.
A very generous apartment. The fridge is constantly restocked by the Rububiyah system. The rent is effectively zero. But, and this is the massive but, you cannot change the locks and kick the other tenants out.
And that is what private ownership is in this specific view. It's changing the locks.
It is a hostile takeover of the property. The sources use this original owner argument to deconstruct our modern property laws. They challenge you, the listener, to trace your title deed back to its source.
Okay, let's do that. I bought my house from a person, let's call him Dave.
Okay, Dave sold it to you. Who did Dave buy it from?
Probably a developer who built the neighborhood.
And who did the developer buy the land from? Maybe a farmer. And who did the farmer get it from?
His parents, maybe.
And them. If you go back far enough, maybe a few hundred years, maybe a few thousand, you eventually get to a person who just found it or took it.
The first guy. The guy who stood on a hill, planted a flag, and drew a line in the dirt.
Exactly. He drew a line and said, "This is mine." But here is the critical legal question the texts pose. Did the creator, the one who made the soil, the rotation, the rain, ever sign a deed transferring the title to that guy?
The text implies the answer is a definitive no.
So if the original transaction was invalid, if the first guy sold something he didn't actually own, then every subsequent sale is legally void. The entire chain of title is broken at the very first link.
That is. Wow, that's going to make a lot of real estate agents very uncomfortable.
It makes our entire civilization uncomfortable because our whole economy is built on that chain of title. But the texts are relentless on this point. They argue that claiming this land is mine is fundamentally a lie. It is a theft from the common trust that was provided for everyone.
And this is where the theology comes roaring back in. Because usually we think of theft as a crime, a civil matter. But these texts call it shirk. They call it idolatry. And I want to dig into this because this was the part that I found most difficult to wrap my head around initially. How is owning a farm polytheism?
Yeah, it requires us to redefine our mental image of an idol. Usually picture a statue, right? A golden calf, something people physically bow down to.
Right, an object.
But the sources focus on the Arabic term andad, which means rivals. The command is, do not set up rivals to God. So the experts in these texts ask, how do you rival the creator? You don't do it by, being stronger than him. That's impossible.
Okay.
You do it by setting up a competing system, a competing gravity.
I love this gravity metaphor.
Yeah.
Let's break down the physics of greed, as the notes call it.
Okay, so think of the divine system, this rubiah, as a gravitational field. What is its natural direction? God creates the rain for everyone, the sun shines on everyone, the earth yields food for everyone. The flow of the divine economy is outward.
Centrifugals.
Exactly. It moves from the source to the masses. It's designed to scatter blessings to provide for all.
Okay, so God's gravity pushes resources out to everyone.
Now, what does private property do? What does the concept of mine do? It creates a localized competing gravity. It acts like a little black hole. It pulls resources in.
Centripetal force.
Exactly. This is my land. You cannot have its fruit. Bring the harvest into my barn. Keep the money in my account. It hoards, it concentrates, it stops the flow.
So the cosmic tug of war.
It is a literal tug of war with the divine intention for those resources. God intends for the resource to reach the hungry person. The landowner, by claiming exclusive ownership, intends to keep it. By blocking that flow, the landowner sets himself up as a rival.
He's effectively saying, God may want you to eat, but you have to get through me first.
You become the gatekeeper. And when you're the gatekeeper to the means of survival, you become the rab. You become the provider. And this is where the real danger lies.
How so?
If I own all the land and you are hungry, you have to submit to me to survive. You have to work for my wages. You have to follow my rules. You might have to flatter my ego. In that economic relationship, who is your practical provider? Is it God or is it me?
In a practical day-to-day sense, it's you. I'm looking at your hand for the bread.
And that, the text argues, is the idolatry. It argues that subjecting one human being to the economic will of another human being is the ultimate degradation of the self.
Wow.
It forces the infinite self we talked about to bow down to a landlord just to keep its finite body alive. It breaks the dignity of the human spirit in the most fundamental way.
That is a terrifying reframe. It changes the villain of the story completely. It's not just about greed is bad. It's about the very act of exclusive ownership is a claim to godhood.
And speaking of villains, the sources bring up the ultimate archetype of this specific behavior, Pharaoh.
Everyone knows Pharaoh. He's the bad guy in the Moses story. But usually we think his crime was, claiming to be a god in some mystical sense. Like he thought he had magical powers.
The movies always show him demanding ritual worship, right? But the texts zoom in on a very specific verse in the Quran where Pharaoh makes his claim to divinity. He doesn't do a magic trick. He gathers his people, he points to the landscape around him, and he says, "Is not the kingdom of Egypt mine and these rivers flowing under me?"
He claimed the real estate.
He claimed the real estate. Specifically, he claimed ownership of the Nile River. Now you have to remember the context. Egypt is a desert. The Nile is the only source of life. If you control the water, you control the life and death of every single person in that valley.
So his godhood wasn't based on magic. It was based on his monopoly of the natural resources.
That was the entire basis of his godhood. The texts call this the pharaonic model of economics. It's the monopolization of the sources of life. And the argument is, when you corner the market on water, or land, or today, maybe it's energy or data, you are enacting the pharaonic model. You are forcing people to bow to you for their survival.
So any system that allows a few people to hold the keys to the sources of life is structurally a pharaonic system.
That is the argument presented in these sources. It is a system of rivals blocking the natural flow of Rububiyah.
But the texts don't just give us a villain. They give us a countermodel. And this is where we get into the story of the she-camel. I have to admit, I didn't know much about this story before reading these notes. It feels a bit strange, a magic camel.
It does feel strange if you don't look at the symbolism. This is the story of the Prophet Saleh and the tribe of Thamud. Now, the Thamud were the superpowers of their day. They were incredibly wealthy. They carved homes directly into mountains, but they were classic oligarchs.
1%.
The 0.1%, probably. And they had privatized the water sources and the fertile pastures. Their cattle were fat and healthy. The poor people's cattle were starving. They had completely disrupted the open access of the system.
Enter Saleh.
Salih comes to them with what the text calls a sign from God, a specific she-camel. But she has a title. She is called Nakatala, God's camel.
And we know from our grammar lesson that the particle in Allah implies the original owner. So this camel represents divine property, public property.
Exactly. She is a walking, living embodiment of the public trust. She belongs to no single human. And Salih lays down a new social contract. This is God's camel. She has a right to drink. On her designated day, she gets open access to the water. No one can stop her. And she grazes wherever she walks. No fences apply to her.
It was a test of their whole system.
It was a stress test of their property laws. By forcing the elite to step back and let this camel drink their private water, Salih was forcing them to acknowledge a higher claim to that water. He was reasserting the open access principle.
He was symbolically breaking their monopoly.
He was trying to, but the elites couldn't handle it. It wasn't that the camel drank too much water. They had plenty. It was the principle of the thing. Acknowledging the camel's right meant acknowledging that the water wasn't truly theirs to begin with. It threatened their entire power structure.
So what did they do?
They hamstrung her. They killed the camel.
They killed the symbol of public ownership.
And the texts say that this act, killing the she-camel, is what triggered their destruction. The society collapsed shortly after. The lesson the sources draw from this is that a civilization that actively destroys the principle of open access, a society that refuses to share the natural resources with the weak and the marginalized, is doomed. It loses its divine and social legitimacy.
It basically triggers a system crash.
A total crash. Because the argument goes, you can't fight the fundamental laws of Rububiyah forever. The pressure just builds up until something breaks.
So we have the pharaonic model, which is hoarding and control, versus the she-camel model, which is sharing and open access. How do we know where we stand? The sources give us a metric, a litmus test, and it's uncompromising.
It is terrifyingly binary. It's the hunger criterion.
Walk us through it.
The sources cite a tradition attributed to the Prophet of Islam that says, if a single person in a settlement sleeps hungry while another person has surplus, God withdraws his protection from that settlement.
One person.
One. Not if 10% of the population is hungry, not if the Gini coefficient is too high. If one person is hungry while his neighbor has extra food in their pantry.
That is a standard that no modern nation on earth currently meets.
No, not one. And the text argues that the very existence of hunger alongside surplus is the definitive proof that the society has committed shirk. It proves that the rivals are winning. The gravity is pulling inward, hoarding, not flowing outward.
And the consequence is the withdrawal of protection. What does that mean in a practical sense?
Well, it sounds mystical, but think about it sociologically. What creates safety and protection in a society? Is it just police? Is it walls and security systems?
No, it's the social contract.
It's trust. It's the social contract. If I know that my neighbor won't let me starve, I have no reason to rob him. We are safe because we are connected.
We're in it together.
But if I know that my neighbor has a warehouse full of food and is watching me and my family starve, the contract is broken. Why should I respect his property? Why should I respect the law that protects his surplus but lets me die? The protection dissolves. You get crime. You get riots. You get revolution. The text argues that hunger is the root of all social chaos.
So the goal isn't just charity, which is like a patch. The goal is to design a system that eliminates the possibility of hunger.
The goal is to build Jin-Ewarzi, an earthly paradise.
I love this concept. Usually, religious texts talk about paradise as the reward after you die. But these sources argue we're supposed to build a prototype right here on Earth.
They argue that the core definition of paradise is a place free from fear and grief. And what is the most fundamental fear? It's the fear of survival.
We're circling right back to the beginning, the cyclic order versus the infinite journey.
Let's connect the dots. Why do we need to eliminate hunger? Why do we need an earthly paradise? Is it so we can all just be lazy and sit around?
No.
No.
Yeah.
It's so we can finally solve the animal problem and get to work on the human project.
As long as I am afraid of hunger, I am stuck in the animal loop of survival.
You are fighting for the car maintenance. You are not driving the car. The divine economy, as envisioned in these texts, is designed to automate the survival needs, to guarantee the food, guarantee the shelter, guarantee the dignity, so that the human mind and spirit are finally truly liberated.
Imagine what humanity would look like if 8 billion people woke up tomorrow and didn't have to worry about rent or their next meal.
Imagine the explosion of art, of science, of philosophy, of love and connection. If the infinite self in every person was actually given the resources and the freedom to grow, instead of being crushed by the finite body's constant, desperate needs, that is the vision.
It's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
But it's also a complete restructuring of how we view ourselves and the world.
Yeah.
We have to stop seeing ourselves as owners and start seeing ourselves as guests.
Or trustees. Guests at a very lavish banquet, where the host has provided everything you could possibly need, and there is only one real rule at the table.
Don't hog the food.
And don't kick the other guests out of their seats.
It sounds so simple when you put it like that. But looking at human history, it seems to be the hardest thing for us to do.
It requires a victory over the ego. The ego wants to be a rab. It wants to be a pharaoh. It wants to say mine, to say ours, or rather, as the text would frame it, his for us.
Yeah.
That requires a spiritual revolution.
This has been a massive deep dive. I mean, we've gone from the biology of mango seeds to the physics of the Earth's rotation, through Arabic grammar to Pharaoh to a symbolic camel, and finally to this vision of a liberated humanity. It's a lot to process.
It frames economics not as a dismal science, but as a profound spiritual test.
So let's wrap this up.
Mm-hmm.
We always like to leave the listener with a provocative thought, something to chew on as they go about their day.
Okay, here's the thought. We live in a culture, especially in the West, that defines freedom almost exclusively by property rights.
Right.
We think we are free because we can buy a plot of land, put up a fence, and keep people out. My home is my castle. That is our bedrock definition of liberty.
Get off my lawn.
Exactly. But if these texts are right, if claiming exclusive ownership of the earth is actually an act of spiritual rebellion, a form of idolatry, and the very root of human suffering, then we have to ask a very uncomfortable question. Is it possible that our modern definition of freedom is actually, from the spiritual perspective, a form of slavery? Are we slaves to the maintenance and protection of our castles? And by locking up the resources of the earth, have we become the oppressors of our own species, trapped in a system of our own making?
So, are we free? Or are we just really aggressive squatters who have forgotten who the landlord is?
That's the question.
I have a feeling I'm going to be looking at the no trespassing signs in my neighborhood a little differently from now on.
I hope so.
Thank you for walking us through this. It was a real mind bender.
Always a pleasure.
And to you listening, thanks for taking the deep dive with us. Keep thinking, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.